Welcome to Valley Newsline. Hello, I'm your host, Ron Whitlock. On the program today, Dennis Nixon, chairman of the Alliance for Security and Trade in Laredo, our interview there, and here in the office of the City of McAllen's mayor, Richard Cortez, also chairman of the Border Trade Alliance in years past. So he is indeed an expert dealing with the area of immigration reform, now being discussed not only in Austin, but in Washington, D.C. Now, Mayor, the entire issue of illegals and immigration and our relationship with Mexico and trade on the border and the impact on the economy of your community, the impact on the economy in Laredo, which is dealing more with a security issue. Is it about legal immigration or is it about illegal immigration? Where is the debate at this point in time, and how can you make sense of it to somebody from outside the border region who doesn't seem to have a clue about how it all works?
The answer to the solution to our country is not looking at it through the illegal immigration side, but first looking at it through the legal immigration side. I can tell you as a technician that we are in a trend of a tremendous concern to me and to the rest of the country, because two things are going to happen for sure. As Dennis Nixon's white paper said, that the fertility rate of the United States is basically zero, and our baby boomers are going to retire. So those are two dynamics that are beyond control. So in order for us to substitute workers, we're going to have to import them from somewhere else. So our government better come up with a plan how to import workers from other areas. We're focused on illegal immigration, and there are obviously benefits from illegal immigrations, and it's to our detriment to have illegal immigration. As a statistician, I can tell you that most frequencies come in a normal bell shape. If you remember statistics in college, you have those that are very bad, you have those that are very good, and then you have those kind of in between. Right now, the rhetoric in national TV is talking about the very bad ones, and I'm just as concerned as they are about the very bad ones, that illegal immigrants come in here that are rapists, thieves, murderers.
But you've estimated that that's about 5% of the 100% who are coming.
That is a small percentage of the larger portion. So what I am suggesting to our government is says, look, let's find a legal way to keep those that do bring value to the United States.
The guest worker bill that Senator Cornyn is now working with the president
Exactly.
on.
Let's take those out of the equation, so then our government and all law enforcement agencies are
focused on the 5% bad guys.
On the 5% that are bad guys. Let me give you an example. My daughter is marrying a very nice young man from Belgium. He came here on a tennis scholarship to work, to play for University of Texas Pan American from Belgium. He's graduated, and he's got to go back to Belgium. Okay? So does that
when we ought to be attaching a green card to his diploma and letting him stay here and benefiting the United States who educated him? Is that your point?
He's a college graduate, and
we're going to make him go home.
We'll bring value, but there's no legal work visa for him to stay in the United States. So he would have to go back. That is just an example of how inadequate our legal immigration system is in the United States.
Here's what Dennis Nixon had to say about what Richard Cortez just commented about.
The reason we have so many illegal immigrants coming into this country is because we have a failed immigration policy, and so we have to solve the immigration policy. That if we got the numbers down by having a good legal process, that then we could deal with the few additional illegals that would still come to this country. And that we would be able to put this thing in a proper perspective from an enforcement standpoint. But when we don't have enough workers, and we've got a lot of jobs unfilled, my company alone, I have several hundred unfilled jobs. And so for those people who say we have a crisis of invasion of Mexican workers, I like to understand from that group of people who they think is going to do this dirty work in America today that immigrants have traditionally done, not only Latinos, but the Eastern and Europeans are doing, the Western Europeans did back in the turn of the century. I just think that there's a lot of confusion here that needs to be straightened out. And I personally feel a lot of it's just based on pure racism. I think it's a anti-Latino attitude, and I think that there's a lot of it being driven by that kind of mentality.
You've seen on this program Steve Murdoch, the state demographer, who told us, Mr. Nixon, 28% of the workers in the construction industry in the United States are undocumented workers. That means everything being built in the United States today is being built by illegal aliens, if you want to use Lou Dobbs terminology, to keep the cost of our construction and our houses low. And those numbers just work all the way down from 28% of the construction industry. If we sent those all back to Mexico tomorrow, what would happen to our economy?
Well, it's even worse than that, Ron. It's not even the fact that that we're trying to keep the cost down. If there was a recent program, I don't know if you saw it on NBC, where Tom Brokaw narrated it on the lower Roaring Fork Valley of Colorado, which is just outside of Aspen, Colorado, which I have some experience in that area, a town called Glenwood Springs and Carbondale in those areas. And they followed a contractor up there who has been working in that valley for decades. And he basically said that I can't find the workers. I don't pay Mexican or Latino workers any less than I pay anybody else. In fact, his starting salary up there was $14 an hour. He said, the problem I have is that I can't get people to work. It's not a matter of money. It's a matter that I don't have a body that can run a tractor or dig a hole or build a building or work on a concrete project. I don't have the people. And so this is not a matter of compensation. This is a matter of finding the physical human skills that are necessary to get the job done. So the 28% number that you talk about, I think is a bogus number, because I think it's a bigger number than that. I think every construction job in this country would be shut down if you took out the Latino worker. We're not going to be successful as a nation if we don't have the workers. One of the interesting things I saw the other day was, Chairman Bernanke of the Federal Reserve was testifying before Congress. You know what his biggest concern was the labor shortages. He says if there's one thing that's going to hurt our economy and cause inflation is this labor demand pool that we have today, because we have a shortage of workers, and with very low unemployment today in America, 4.5%, 4.6%, where are we going to find the workers to continue to grow our economy? And I'm a business person, and I know one reality is if I don't have people to employ, I cannot expand my business. If I'm going to open up a new branch and I don't have the workers to fill that branch, how am I going to open that branch? And people laugh, and they're basically say, oh, you're making this up. But I can tell you for a fact that I have several hundred unfilled jobs in this company out of a company of only 3,500 workers. I don't know what that situation is like in every other company around America today. As you said, people are moving out of the Northeast not because of so much for price, but there's just a pure problem of finding workers. And so, like water finding its own level, you have an unemployed worker in Mexico, you have a job demand in the United States. What do you think is going to happen? People are going to satisfy that demand. That's the capitalistic system. Our immigration system doesn't provide for that. We have a problem at the low end, we have a problem at the high end. We don't have enough workers being allowed to come into this country on the high end, meaning the PhDs in science and engineering and technology. You know, it's a crime, Ron, that we educate half of the scientists in the world. 35%, I believe, of our PhDs in the sciences are foreign-born, and yet we educate them in the United States, and then we won't give them a visa to stay here. They go off to China or to India or Europe and practice their trade over there and compete against us. Why would you not, if you've educated somebody at Stanford or MIT, say go to work for Microsoft or go to work for General Electric or go to work for the federal government?
Go to work for International Bank of Commerce,
someplace in this country that we've educated you. Why wouldn't we want to keep you here? But we send them back because there's not enough visas for those people. On the low end of the cycle, which we're talking about mostly today in terms of these 500,000, 600,000 immigrants that are here undocumented, that's where we need to expand that. We only have a few 100,000 of those visas available. If you don't have a quota that's sufficient to meet the demand, you're going to have people go around the quota, and that's just exactly what's happened. I'm very concerned as to why more business people are not engaged. We've got a real problem facing us right around the corner here in terms of being able to provide the workers, and many of us are now facing worker shortages every day. My workers are aging and retiring and going away. I'm one of those people, you know. I'm a baby boomer. and we're losing all our workforce. And so I look out there and say, who's going to execute my plan? Who's going to be part of this institution's future? And I know as a business person, if I don't grow, I die. People, I think, are realizing that with the things that are being talked about in Congress about some people wanting to so-called remove 12 million people from our system, of which 6 or 7 or 8 million of them may be employed, where are those workers going to come from if you pull them out? And then where is that growth coming from the future? Because we know we're going to zero population growth in this country. Why wouldn't we want those people here filling those jobs? Because they are now filling those jobs. If they leave, we're going to have a crisis beyond imagination. You and I know, as residents of the border, that we could not survive economically without our friends to the south. We'd be a wasteland here without the economic support we get from these people. One of the ironies of NAFTA is that we've created an environment to have global business in this region, but we don't want the people to move around. How do you do that? You know, we want to restrict the movement of people, but we want business and trade to work. Well, I mean, those are two conflicting ideas, and so the people who don't want the people to move around are really out of touch with what's going on in the world today, and we have to understand that. We've heard reports now that because the rules and immigration problems are so bad that major multinational companies like Exxon and people like that, companies like that, are having their corporate meetings offshore because they can't bring all of their diverse population of workers into this country. They can't get them the visas. So they've got to have their meetings in places like London because they can get into London easier than they can get into the United States of America. If they want to hold their corporate headquarters meeting in Houston or Dallas, Texas, people from their vast array of employees from Indonesia and all over the world like they have can't get here. So we have a serious problem in this country in terms of recognizing the fact that we are part of a global community, and we've got to be able to allow these people to move freely back and forth. You know, we've gotten so paranoid about the 9/11 issues that we're going to end up crippling ourselves. At the end of the day, the old story is, you know, you grab a bird and you squeeze it too hard, you squeeze the life out of it. Well, that's what we're doing here. We're going to, in our effort to protect this bird, we're going to squeeze the life out of it. And these kinds of problems don't show up for 5 or 10 years because the bad decisions that we're making today in a massive economy with so many moving parts, all of those little delicate balances that go on in this economy, when you start pushing them around, you don't see the result of that disastrous decision for 4 or 5 or 6 years, and sometimes as many as 10 years. McAllen's leading the nation in economic growth. Laredo's up there leading the nation in economic growth. That's because of NAFTA and the trade agreements and the vision that was created. But we didn't see the benefit of that, Ron, for 4 or 5 years. And now 10, 12, 14 years into the program, we're really seeing the great benefits of it. So I'm worried that we're going to look back 10 years from now and say, look at all of the bad decisions we made in this country that hurt our economy. As a superpower, we, at the end of the day, are no more of a superpower than our economy is a superpower. And if we don't have the money to pay to support the activities of this country around the world, then we're not going to be successful over the long term. We're going to give up our preeminence as the largest, most powerful country in the world because we're giving up our economic power. If we don't provide the resources in this hemisphere, they will be provided somewhere else. That is the definition of trade. You know, and the original plan, the original vision, I think, was a proper vision, that we should use our resources in this hemisphere to recognize that we're in a competitive business environment with the rest of the world. And the 2 other big trading blocks in the world are the European community and the Far East community. And those 3 big trading blocks are what are going to determine who is sort of the top dog in the world here 20, 30 years from now. And so the big asset we have in this hemisphere that we are continuing to beat up on is labor. We do have a young, dynamic labor force in Latin America. We do not have a young, dynamic labor force in North America. We are going to zero population growth by 2015 in this country. Our fertility rates are going to zero. That's already happened in Europe. Some countries in Europe have gone negative. So if you don't have immigrants to fill these jobs, where are you going to do these jobs? then we're going to start moving entire manufacturing operations offshore. We're not going to build the car at all in the United States. We're going to go build it in Brazil, or we're going to build it in Honduras, or we're going to build it in Argentina, or we're going to build it in Mexico or someplace else.
Your reaction to Mr. Nixon's comment?
I agree with him because he has the facts. We are an aging society. Right now, 1 out of every 12 Americans are over 65 years old. In 40 years, 1 out of every 5 Americans is going to be over 65. One more time, 1 out of every 5 Americans is going to be over 65. How can you have a growing and expanding economy when 20% of the people who live in this country are going to be over 65, which I hope they're in the golden years and retiring?
The president of your own McAllen Economic Development Corporation, Keith Patridge, has told this audience that in particular the reason there are more jobs being created in your city, city of McAllen, at this particular moment is because the plants are closing in the Northeast, locating in McAllen and Reynosa and the Maquiladora complex, because there are no workers to fill the jobs in the Northeast, not because, like they used to in the old days when they first started coming, to get the lower wages that the Maquiladora operation offers to that company and entity, because there are no workers there to fill the jobs anymore.
Ron, absolutely. And I want the audience, your audience, to pay particular attention to the people that are giving you this information. Dennis Nixon, CEO of a major bank.
The other big issue that we've failed to recognize is the real risks we have on our southern border in terms of the political stability of Latin America, all of Latin America. I mean, we have Chavez down there in Venezuela who wants to be the next Castro of Latin America, you know, and he's running around all over Latin America trying to foment anti-American sentiment. And obviously you've seen his speeches in front of the United Nations. You know, you have basically a maniac there running around talking bad about the United States every day of the week. And so,
almost had a leftist president Obregón in the recent
absolutely.
election.
And I was going to say that for the sake of a couple of 100,000 votes, we would have had a leftist in Mexico. We came that close to having, I think, an absolute disaster.
And if nothing done in the next 8 years, what could happen?
Well, we have 6 years.
6 years.
6 years of this president, Calderon, to basically bring Mexico back to the center, because also we need to recognize that Calderon is a minority president. He was only elected with 35% of the vote. And that is a challenge in itself, to be able to govern in a country where only 1/3 of the people have voted for you. So 2/3 of the population did not support his presidency. And so he's got an uphill battle in the face of a lot of problems with the civil order in the country in terms of drug dealers and all the violence that's going on. He's going to have to deal with that. He's going to have to also at the same time deal with the economic prosperity of the country. At the same time, he's trying to clean up all the violence problems. So he's got a full plate on his table today of things that he's going to have to accomplish. The United States government should recognize clearly through his first steps of deporting through extradition these 14 or 15 criminals that were sent back to the United States to face justice in the United States. That's our first time. I mean, we're seeing a president here that wants to connect himself to the United States, wants to embrace control, wants to embrace civil order, wants to do the right things. You know, we have a cooperative country who's got problems. We ought to be focusing on solving their problems and not adding to them. If we cut off the supply of money coming from these undocumented into Mexico, we'll destroy their economy. And what good
bring
is
about a leftist government in 6 years?
Then we're going to have a bunch more people unemployed, a bunch more people that are going to be desperate. People are going to get fed. You know, people are going to find a way to feed themselves. And so if they can't find their work in the country of origin, they're going to go where they have to go to get their jobs. And so from my perspective, you know, we're once again not looking at this thing within the global context of all of the issues. And I've said, and we've repeatedly said, people are failing to connect all the dots. We're not understanding the ramifications of all of our decisions and how they affect everything that's going on here. And so if we make this decision over here, what are the effects all over here? And we're not thinking this thing through carefully. And so if when we go out here and build a wall and we send a message to our neighbor that we've got a Berlin Wall down here in South Texas, what kind of a message does that send to the average Mexican on the other side of the river over there, who's looked at the America as a dream country, as a place where they can possibly achieve the same kind of economic security over time in their own country, and we're being told, stay out. We don't even want you to see us. We're going to build a wall so you can't even look across the border. I mean, what kind of a message is that? I think it's horrible. And so we need to think.
Does that play into the hands of those who would be a leftist president in 6 years?
Oh, absolutely. I think if Calderon is not successful, Mexico will have a leftist president. I mean, he's standing in the wings. They're ready to catch the ball. I mean, the American government needs to understand that the success of this future relationship with Mexico is dependent upon this next 6 years of this man's term. And I think it's going to be most defined in the first 3 years.
So where does our immigration policies stand at this particular point, and the potential for building a fence or a wall at the border, where does that fit into this mix of potential leftist takeover of Mexico?
Well, I think they're all tied together, because the leftists are obviously going to say that the Americans hate Latinos. They've demonstrated that by deporting thousands of or millions of them who are illegally working in this country, which is what most of the right-wing mentality is. Get them out, throw them out, get rid of them. Building a wall to keep them out. I mean, what's the difference between East Germany and West Germany, except the wall and an incredibly difficult government attitude? I mean, we're positioning ourselves to be a difficult, very difficult neighbor. And you know, you throw eggs on your neighbor's house for 4 or 5 weeks, you know, if he's your best friend, he's not going to be happy with you. I mean, how many eggs can we throw on Mexico's wall and not expect them to, to rebel or to have a very negative attitude? And at some point, people just get mad beyond reason and they don't make good decisions. Maybe the Mexicans shut down the border and don't let us go in. Maybe they start nationalizing certain industries like Chavez is doing. You know, where are we with all of that kind of stuff? And now that we have this interdependency between manufacturing in Mexico and manufacturing in the United States, where are we if we suddenly have all of our supplies to all of our automobile manufacturers cut off that are now supplying all of these parts to our American manufacturers, and they can't produce those parts in the United States today? Are we going to shut down half of our manufacturing facilities in the United States? They do have some power in this game because they are providing hundreds of thousands of parts to this country's manufacturing base today.
Mayor Cortez, former chairman of the Border Trade Alliance, that's a pretty scary thought, having an unstable leftist-style government a la Bolivia and all the Argentinian, all the enemies we've got in South America at this point, having that kind of a government similar to Cuba on our southern border.
Ron, absolutely, and the statements of Mr. Nixon are very true. Every time I go visit a high-ranking official in Mexico, after the cordial "How are you?" what is your position on the wall? What's your position on immigration? So we Americans have to be very careful of our policy with Mexico. We don't want to give Mexicans another reason to hate Americans, because if you really want to have a security problem, have a leftist government in Mexico, then we're really going to have a security problem in our country. We are Texas' largest trading partner is Mexico, and 85% of that trade goes through ports of entry here on the border. So you bet that it would be an economic nightmare for the border, and if it's an economic nightmare for the border, it'll be an economic nightmare for Texas and our country.
Mayor Cortez, thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Mr. Wadline.
Thank you for hosting our studio crew here in your office in the city of McAllen.
Well, thank you for your service to the Rio Grande Valley.
Well, thank you. And thank you for joining us here as a member of our viewing audience. For archived editions, go to valleynewsline.tv. Till next time, adios.